Yo, welcome back to a brand new video here on the second channel. It is now time to get into some NAIC content, and today we're going to be doing a tier list video for NAIC. NAIC is this Friday, and I'm looking forward to it. I will be in attendance myself, and I decided it's time to get open the NAIC tier list. These are all the decks that I think are feasible for NAIC. There might be other decks I maybe missed out, but this I kind of gathered from online tournaments and all that stuff, and I compiled it into one big tier list. I think that NAIC is going to be a very interesting time. I'm excited for it. It's going to be some NAIC content coming up this week here on the second channel. You definitely do not want to miss out on it. And without further ado, we're going to get into it. Of course, I will leave a link to this tier list down below if you want to do it yourself. Let me know what you think of the tier list down below too. And also, if you haven't subbed here to the second channel yet, make sure to click that subscribe button down below. We are on the road to 6,000 subscribers here. So if you haven't subbed yet to the second channel, click that subscribe button. What are you doing? All right, let's get into the tier list. Now, starting things off, we got Gardevoir. Gardevoir is the expected best deck for NAIC, and I think that we definitely got to say Gardevoir with Reversal Energy is basically the BDIF or S tier. Guardy Reversal is just ridiculous. Reversal Energy is just so strong in Gardevoir with Shining Arcana Guardy. It's a very strong combo, and I think that it is going to be kind of the forefront of the best deck for NAIC. If you're going to want to beat any deck, I think that you kind of want to make sure you beat Gardevoir first and foremost. That is the big deck you want to beat for NAIC. And then we got Guardy with just Psychic Energy. Now, this is still like a deck that people are still playing, is Guardy with just pure Psychic Energy. You can lean into more Cresselia plays. You have Zacian not playing Reversal. I think it's still kind of a hindrance. I think Reversal Energy is too good not to play. So the pure Psychic build, still probably tier 1. I mean, the deck is still probably good enough to be a tier 1 deck regardless. But yeah, Guardy, Psychic Energy, pure Psychic build, still probably fine. I mean, it still has Iono and Super Rod. And with this build, you do lean more into, like, you know, Cresselia and Zacian V. You still obviously attack with Gardevoir, Shining Arcana. You just don't have Reversal Energy. You're just plain pure Psychic Energy. And I think both builds are decent. I think Reversal is still better, though I do think Guardy Psychic is still probably tier 1. And then Guardy with Drifloom. Now, the idea behind Drifloom is that Drifloom does a lot of damage and can one-shot Pokemon as a single prizer. So you kind of treat it like Shining Arcana Guardy as a one-prize attacker, and you play it with Bravery Charm. You probably play Champions Festival, so Drifloom can do like 330 damage or something crazy like that. I think this deck is kind of weird. It's a deck that's been kind of non-existent in online tourneys and even in like Twitter. And I don't know if this Guardy Drifloom deck is the way to play it. I think the problem with Drifloom, it hurts your matchup against like Lost Box. You're only ever using it against other 2 and 3 prize decks. But the ability for Drifloom to take a 1-hit KO is kind of insane. I definitely think that Drifloom is a very cool concept. I'm going to put it into the... I'm going to say it's maybe tier 1 for NAIC. It's still like a very strong concept. I mean, if you're playing against, you know, a big deck with a big 1-hit KO option with Drifloom, I think it's pretty cool. Though it's just not very good against Lost Box. Like, I would rather just not play Drifloom if I'm going to be playing against more Lost Box. It could be good in the mirror, I guess, because it does give you a better... It gives you a time to 1-hit KO like Zacian V and Guardy EX a bit easier, maybe, without having to use a Shining Arcana, which can be very interesting. I don't know. It's like it gives you almost like a third Shining Arcana Gardevoir, where it just gives you another big blow up 1-hit KO attacker on a 1-prizer as opposed to using a 2-prizer. So, and that's the big upside to Drifloom. I don't hate it. It does require a little bit more setup though, because again, you do have to play Bravery Charm, and you probably want to have the Champions Festival in the deck too. Drifloom is exploitable for sure, though. You know, if you run to somebody with like Spirit Panic Mask, or something like Tool Jammer can get awkward, or Radiant Holuchas. I don't know. I'm not sold on Drifloom because you're not ever going to use it into Lost Box. I think that's kind of the main downside of it. Next up is Guardy Mewtwo. This is probably the Guardy Mewtwo Reversal Energy deck that did well in Japan. Hasn't really translated that well over into our side of the world. I don't know if that Guardy Mewtwo has been fully discovered yet. I think most people just kind of like the straightforward Guardy deck without having the Mewtwo. The Mewtwo Guardy deck is cool using Reversal Energy and Luxray, kind of playing a checkmate style deck. That's the concept of the deck here, is you're trying to play like a checkmate deck. I think it's fine. Maybe a rogue deck. It's kind of underexplored, and with people from all around the world coming, maybe people from all around the world are going to want to play a deck like Guardy Mewtwo. So maybe we'll have a good performance at NAIC. Could be an underdog deck. I'm not sold on it, though. I don't think the deck is like that, you know, good compared to like the reversal build where you're just kind of going all off and aggressive, as opposed to playing more tactically and passively. Guardy Mewtwo is also a little bit harder to play it tries to create a checkmate scenario by staying behind in prizes, abusing reversal, and then trying to have that late game Mewtwo. The deck is cool, though, and I definitely could see somebody doing well with it, though I'm not sure that it is the play for NAIC, but you never know. We'll have to see. Next up is Arcdura. So we got the Arceus decks next. So Arcdura Umbreon is the first build. So I think Arcdura is maybe tier 2 right now. I don't think it's been played enough for it to be any higher. Like, I haven't really seen that many results from Arcdura Umbreon yet. I think that Arcdura is pretty well positioned in the meta, but also I think that it gets a little bit worse in the meta. It does have a pretty good Guardy matchup, in my opinion. I think Arcdura Umbreon is great against Gardevoir. It plays Lost City, Umbreon VMAX, Duraludon VMAX is also pretty good into Gardevoir because Gardevoir can't one-shot Dura that easily as it's very tanky, and it can't be affected by reversal energy, which is also one of the big things with the Duraludon. Though I don't know if the deck is great. The problem with the deck, it does get a little bit worse with Iono. The deck doesn't play a draw engine. It just relies on supporters. And Iono can be a very big problem for Arcdura, and that is a huge issue. I also think that Xianpao is a pretty bad matchup for Arceus Duraludon because Xianpao can just one-shot your Dura. Yes, you can one-shot Xianpao, but you're not going to one-shot... They can one-shot your Duraludon, and you're not going to win the prize trade because your Arceus is not KOing the Xianpao. So I think Arcdura needs to figure out how to beat Xianpao, but I think that it's got a great matchup into Guardy, and I also think that it's got a decent matchup into Lugia. Lugia, a lot of the time, don't respect Duraludon, and why would they? And the single strike build, you know, some lists right now don't even play the Urshifu anymore, which is huge for the Duraludon. Even if they do, I still think that, like, this deck can beat the Urshifu build. I beat it in Hartford, so I don't think that this deck really loses to Urshifu that easily, but I think Arcdura is still a fantastic play. Kind of an underdog deck, but at the same time, it does get a little bit worse. The one thing that scares me is the matchup spread is kind of awkward against Xianpao, and I also think that the Lost Tina matchup is another bad matchup for this deck. This deck does get a little bit better matchups with Gardevoir's popularity and Lugia, but I think it also gets some bad matchups with Lost Tina becoming popular again, and also Xianpao being a bit of a scary matchup for the deck. But I think Arcdura Umbreon is decent. It's a really aggressive deck. It has the most amount of, like, techable options you can play in the Arcdura variants because you can play the Hawlucha Alakazam package if you want, or you could play something different. So I don't know. I like it. Tier 2. Next up is Arcdura Vulpix, the Alex Shemansky build. Probably tier 2. I think that this deck does have a little bit of more upsides than the Umbreon build. It's not as aggressive as Umbreon. You also don't have that really strong Dark-type VMAX Pokemon and the built-in Gust. But you do have Vulpix V-Star, which isn't bad right now. Gardevoir, unless you're playing against Guardy Drifloom, doesn't respect Vulpix right now. Yes, they have Memory Skip Ralts. And yes, they have Cresselia, but with Lost City and Switch plus Gen Energy potentially, I think Vulpix is honestly pretty cool right now. I think that Vulpix is also cute into Xianpao decks because Xianpao relies very heavily on abilities. I think that the Palkia build for Vulpix is tough because Palkia V can attack Vulpix. And I also think that they do have a few other plays. Maybe they play that Kyogre from Crown Zenith. So Vulpix is not ideal against Xianpao. Like, it's okay against Xianpao, but it's not great against Xianpao. I think that it's cool, but I don't think Vulpix is enough to beat Xianpao, but it doesn't seem bad either in Xianpao. Like, I think the Arceus Xianpao deck is actually where the Vulpix is going to be good against because they have the V-Star, but they don't have the Palkia. The Arceus V only does 110. They're 3-shotting your Vulpix, so that's probably the better matchup. But yeah, I think Vulpix Dura is cool. I don't know if it's better than the Umbreon build. I think the thing that makes the Vulpix good is it maybe has a better time in a Xianpao. Arcdura Vulpix is okay. You do lose the Umbreon, which I think is a really big loss. I think Umbreon is just kind of insane, so I don't know. I think they're both decent nonetheless, and Arcdura Vulpix has actually popped up again in the online tourney scene. So, honestly, who knows? Next up is Arcdrago. I'm going to put that in Rogue. I want this deck to be good. There's a lot of Arcdrago believers now. I've seen it in online tourneys. I want to include on the tier list because there are people that do like the deck. I think the deck does get a cool addition with Noivern V. I think Noivern V is a pretty good upgrade to the Drago kind of deck. So we'll have to see where Arcdrago goes. Then another like Arc Dragon deck is Arcgudra, which is another one of those like fringe Arceus decks that sees some play. Arcgudra, I don't think is that great. Honestly, it might even be like a don't play deck, honestly. Like, I don't know if I like the deck anymore because a lot of the time this deck doesn't really get to abuse Moisture Star. Yeah, the deck can maybe play like a Vulpix V-Star or something, or maybe in like Duraludon. I don't know. But I think the issue with this deck is it struggles against Gardevoir. I think Gardevoir just now destroys Gudra thanks to Reversal Energy. I also think that this deck struggles against What else? What Xianpao? Yes, that was what I was thinking. Yeah, Xianpao. Xianpao doesn't really care about Gudra. It can easily one-hit KO Gudra V-Star, so I don't think our Gudra is very good, unfortunately. Next up is Arceus. I think this is maybe an underrated deck. I'm gonna throw it in tier 2. This deck is pretty strong. It's a very good sleeper style deck. Nobody really techs for it or cares about it, but then all of a sudden you play against it and then you're crying. I think the issue with Arceus is because of Lost Box, you know, it has a good Lost Box matchup. It has a good Lugia matchup because you have the Aerodactyl, but I don't know if it has a good Guardy matchup. And that's the thing that kind of throws me off about the deck is, can it be Gardevoir, right? Because Gardevoir, like, you have, like, Judge and Path and Iono Path, which is not bad against Gardevoir, but is it enough to beat Gardevoir is the question. So I think Arceus maybe has to figure out a better way to beat Gardevoir, but I don't think the deck is bad. I think it's still honestly pretty good. Klefki is still just great right now, in my opinion. There's so many decks that just don't like Klefki, and Klefki is a very strong card right now that wins you a lot of games because Klefki is very broken. Next up is Arceus Vulpix. This is another deck that like did well in an online tournament. Probably more of a rogue deck than anything else. Like if you're just playing like a straight Arc Vulpix deck, doesn't even seem that bad because you have, you know, a heavier count of Vulpix, so you can maybe put up more of a fight against Xianpao. And okay, I guess. I think the Duraludon Vulpix build is better than straight Vulpix, but straight Vulpix is kind of cute. You get a little bit more cuter plays. Maybe you're going to play like an Arc Pika Vulpix deck, so that could be an option. Maybe that's just better than just straight Arc Vulpix, but it's a cool idea. Next up is Arctina. Probably tier 1. I mean, Arctina's been doing pretty good right now in online tournaments, and I think Arctina's pretty well positioned for NAIC. I think it's the one Arceus deck that beats all the other Arceus decks. And I also think that its Guardy matchup is kind of even. You have Path and Judge and Iono, which is really strong. And you can play Cleansing Gloves again, which helps your Giratina one-shot their Gardevoir. Again, the issue will be is, like, I don't know if this deck is that good against, like, Reversal Guardy all around. Yes, you have, like, the Judge and Path, but I think that Reversal Guardy can still just body you pretty easily, because if they just find an out to a stadium, you just get bodied, so I'm not, like, sold on it. I also think this deck still doesn't beat Lugia at all. Like, maybe Single Strike Lugia is beatable if you play Flying Pikachu and they don't play Urshifu, but I don't think that Arctina has the greatest matchup against Lugia, because if they just get out of the path lock, you probably just lose the game, in my opinion. I don't know. I think Arctina's pretty good, though, still. I think it's still decent in the meta, well-positioned in the meta, in all honesty. And with, like, Spiritomb, your Mew matchup gets a little bit easier. So, yeah, I think that this deck is pretty solid. Probably a tier 1 deck, honestly. I think it's maybe tier 2, but I don't know, man. Its online tourney results have kind of given it maybe a tier 1 status. Bordering on tier 2, though, to be fair. Next up is Xianpao. Probably tier 1. Honestly, we all thought Xianpao was going to be the next Miraidon. I think that this deck has the potential to be a tier 1 deck. Its online tourney results have been pretty promising, and it's been getting a lot of hype, and the hype has kind of been shown that, hey, it's not just a, you know, it's not just Miraidon Part 2, it's an actual, like, potential good deck. So, we'll see. Now, it depends on what build the Xianpao is good, whether it's Palkia, with Arceus, or with neither. I don't know, man. I think that Xianpao is definitely in an interesting position for NAIC. How many people will play Xianpao to NAIC is going to be the question, though, because this is a deck that I feel like I don't know if many top players will play over something like Lost Box or Guardy, so I'm not sure that Xianpao is going to be, like, a deck that you have to respect. I think, here's the thing. Will top players play it? Maybe. This could definitely be more of a, you know, first couple round type deck where you'll probably play against it in the first few rounds of NAIC, and then maybe if you start going like 3-0, 4-0, 5-0, you're going to start seeing less and less Xianpao, or you won't see it at all. Or maybe I'm wrong and Xianpao's going to just pop off at NAIC and you're going to see a lot more of it as you do well in the tournament. Or it's more of a bottom table-y type deck. We'll have to see. I'm expecting Xianpao to still have a decent outcome or decent showing at NAIC, for the record, because it's just been getting a lot of hype right now. A lot of people just like playing it because Rain Dance is a fun deck to play, I guess. It's what I guess one of the more like funner, good decks in the format is basically the way to play. Like what I'm saying with Xianpao, it's a deck people like to play because it's fun. And we got DTMU. Probably tier 2. I think DTMU does fall down a peg because the Spiritomb matchup is pretty bad. The problem is how popular will Spiritomb be, right? Spiritomb is currently not usable on TCG Live, which hurts testing, and DTMU without Tomb is honestly pretty good, maybe even better than Meloetta Mew. However, with Spiritomb in the format, Meloetta Mew might be better. So I'm not sure where DTMU stands. Probably tier 2. If DTMU does not play against that much Spiritomb, the deck can actually be pretty cracked. But if you're playing against a lot of Spiritomb, then DTMU is probably pretty bad. I'm just going to put in tier 2 for that reason alone. And then we got Lugia. So Colorless Lugia. Colorless Lugia and Single Strike Lugia both seem to be tier 1 right now. Both seem to be pretty solid. Both builds have their ups and downs. The Colorless build struggles against Xianpao, but has a pretty good time in a Guardy, and even Lost Box thanks to Snorlax. However, the Single Strike build seems better in Xianpao and has more of a straightforward, line of play with Tyranitar and Urshifu, or whether or not you're playing the Urshifu or you're just playing Tyranitar or not. Both builds are pretty good. I think both are tier 1. Both are, have ups and downs, right? So that's kind of the idea that I have of where Lugia stands right now. Both builds of Lugia have their ups and downs, which is going to be the main selling point behind playing Lugia. I think it's still going to be a very popular deck. A lot of people just play Lugia because it's Lugia, right? It wins games. It's straightforward. It's still very good, has still a decent matchup against Gardevoir and Lost Box, and that's going to be the selling point behind Lugia. I would still expect to see a lot of Lugia at NAIC, in my opinion. I think Lugia will still be very popular at NAIC because it's just very, very good. All right, next up is the Lost Zone variant. So we got a couple builds of Lost Box here. We got Sky Seal Stone Lost Box builds. Probably tier 2. I think the problem with Sky Seal is that it's very good still, but it just is so bad when you get Iono'd after taking a big knockout. So that's my issue with Sky Seal Stone, is that it plays more into Iono, and I don't like that. Probably tier 2. Maybe even don't play, to be honest. I think Sky Seal Box might just suck, to be honest. I might actually just put that in don't play. Sky Seal Stone is very good. You can use it maybe to, win the game, but I feel like if you're going to use it early on in the game, you just get farmed heavy by Iono, and that's, I think, the reason why you probably don't want to play Sky Seal Lost Box. Next up is Lost Goo. Fortunately, don't play. I think Goodra just sucks now because I think Gardevoir just destroys you, Xianpao destroys you, Lugia destroys you if they have Urshifu. I mean, Goodra can beat the Colorless build of Lugia, sure, but other than that, I think that Goodra's just bad right now. It just doesn't have a good matchup against Gardevoir, and I also think that it doesn't have a good matchup against Xianpao, and I think that's just ultimately why Goodra is not very good for NAIC. It's like a deck that still could maybe do well, because maybe not maybe get day 2 at best, but maybe fall apart after that. I don't know. It's a deck that people don't know how to play against. In the first couple rounds, you can maybe go 2-0 or 3-0 with Goodra because maybe people don't know what they're doing against Goodra, but I think Goodra just has a really bad matchup against Gardevoir. Now that Guardy has reversal energy, Goodra gets farmed. I mean, maybe Goodra can play Temple of Sinnoh and Iono, or Iono and Judge Temple Sinnoh, so maybe I'm wrong about Goodra, but even then, I still think Gardevoir beats you, even if you were to, Temple of Sinnoh their reversal energy. I still think that Gardevoir can still, beat you pretty easily. Next up is Kyogre. Kyogre Lost Box still probably tier S. We all hate to see it, but yes, I think that both Turbo Lost Box and Kyogre Lost Box are both still very much good decks. I mean, Iono is very good, and it does fix the matchup a little bit. You're going to win a game because you get a good Iono to stick, but other than that, I'm not going to put much stock into this deck, because I'm not going to put much stock into Iono beating, Lost Box 100% of the time. Lost Box is still just disgusting. Turn 1 Dragonite is still also insane. And Kyogre can play around Iono. As long as Kyogre has a way to take 4 prizes, they can just not play into an Iono past 4 cards, meaning that they can treat it like a Judge, essentially, which is fine. Kyogre has proven before that it doesn't mind playing against decks that rely on Judge. So I don't know, man. Both builds are still just insane. Lost Box is still just a disgusting deck, in my opinion. And I would still respect Lost Box because Lost Box is good. And Lost Box still has a decent matchup into Guardy. Yes, Iono exists, but Lost Box still seems fine into the Guardy mirror mounts. I don't know. We'll see where Lost Box goes. Still going to be a lot of Lost Box. I'm guaranteeing you most of the top players are going to play Lost Box. It's just expect to see that. I fully expect most top players are going to play Lost Box again, whether it's Turbo or Kyogre or Turbo Kyogre Lost Box. Guarantee you top players are going to bring Lost Box again. So definitely make sure your deck beats Lost Box. Have a game plan against it, because I think Lost Box is still just tier S right now. I hate it myself. I hate Lost Box, but it's still a tier S deck. Next up is Lostina. Funny enough, the deck actually seems to be tier 1 right now. Lostina is actually doing pretty good in online tournaments and actually putting up a pretty good fight in the meta, because in the Scarlet Violet format, everyone was creaming over this deck. They're like, oh my god, Lostina is so good in the new format. In Japan, it did well, and then afterwards, it just flopped. But now it's starting to maybe make a bit of a comeback into the meta. So Lostina is interesting. Will it be a deck that can win NAIC? Maybe. I think Lostina has a great matchup spread across the board. I don't even know if it has a bad matchup. Maybe Kyogre or Turbo Lost Box are your only bad matchups, but Lostina seems to be pretty good right now. It has a pretty good time into Gardevoir. I also think that it beats Arceus piles pretty easily. Maybe not Arctina, but Arcdura doesn't like to see Tina. I also think Tina still beats Mew now because you can play Star Requiem Drapion split to beat Mew, and I think you're going to play Drapion in Tina anyways because it'll help against Gardevoir. So yeah, I think Lost Tina is actually pretty strong in the format right now, and I would definitely expect to see a couple Lost Tina at NAIC. You might hit one. It's definitely possible to hit a Lost Tina deck at NAIC. It's maybe that good and popular of a deck now to fully expect that. Then we got to talk about Darkrai. I mean, maybe tier 2. I'm going to be kind. I was going to put it in the rogue category, but I mean, Darkrai is still a deck that got top 8, and it does run hot. I actually don't think Darkrai is bad against most top decks, except for debatably Lost Box, but other than that, I think Darkrai still runs hot. I think Iono, Squawkabilly actually give the deck a little bit more pop-off potential, and Iono's great because it maybe gives you a better time in a Lost Box. And Darkrai probably beats Gardevoir. I think Darkrai can beat Gardevoir pretty convincingly. And I think that it's probably good into, like, most Arc variants, and maybe even Xianpao is maybe difficult. I think the way to beat Xianpao would have to just be go Darkrai, Darkrai, Moltres, Moltres. But yeah, I think Darkrai can probably beat Xianpao too. I mean, it really comes down to who takes the first 2 prize KO, but I think that Darkrai is fine. Darkrai into Lugia might be a little sketchy, but I think Darkrai is actually not bad right now. It's a pretty good deck versus Gardevoir, and maybe Iono and Squawkabilly give it enough upgrades for it to maybe be something to consider. It's going to be a tier 2 for now, though. Maybe the bottom of the tier 2, but still tier 2. Next up is Sableye Cramsard. Maybe Sableye Cramsard's tier 1. I don't know. I might actually put that in tier 2. I actually don't know if this deck is good anymore. The problem with the deck is that Charizard is still great, don't get me wrong, but I don't know if this deck is that good in the Iono format. I would almost just play, like, Kyogre Lost Box. I feel like that's just better versus Iono. With heavy Iono spam, I think that Sableye Cramsard is a little bit worse against Iono. So I don't know if this deck is tier 1 anymore. I think it's probably tier 2 at best. It's still not terrible, don't get me wrong, but, like, Iono, I think, is just really bad for this deck. And Lost City could still be popular, too. Like, some Shampellas play it. Arc decks play it. Lost City's a big issue. I'm not sold on this deck, yeah. I don't know about Sableye Cramsard. I don't know if the deck is tier 1. Maybe tier 2, right. Tier 2 at best. Rapidstrike's probably tier 2. Rapidstrike's still, like, okay. I actually think it's not bad into Gardevoir. Its Lost Box matchup is still really good. The deck does get Iono, which could help the Lost Box matchup even more, or even the Guardy matchup even more. So, yeah, Rapidstrike's still fine, though there is some things that make it not great. One, I think that it has an abysmal Xianpao matchup, and I think its Lugia matchup is also still pretty bad. And maybe the Snorlax build is a bit more beatable, but I think ultimately Rapidstrike just will still struggle into Xianpao Lugia, but I think it can beat the Lost Zone and Guardy decks, and that's the thing that makes this deck playable. So it's a tier 2 deck for now, because I think it can beat Lost Box and Guardy, but I don't know if it's going to beat that much else apart from those 2 decks specifically. And then we got to talk about the Luminous Energy Box, which is what Sawyer's been playing to the online tourneys, and kind of made a name for the deck already since it's had decent performances. So Luminous Melony Box is cool. It basically just plays a bunch of V Pokemon and Luminous Energy and Melony to build them up, like Raikou V and Entei V, Suicune V. I don't even know if it plays Entei V. I don't know. It just plays a lot of V Pokemon that work with Luminous Energy and Melony, okay? And the deck's kind of cool. Does it beat Guardy? Probably not. Does it beat Lost Box? I don't even know. Like, I don't know how good the deck really is, but it seems to be a fun little rogue deck right now. We'll have to see where it goes in NAIC, but it's a fun idea that I don't know if it's the play for NAIC. It just seems more like a fun meme deck for the online tourneys, and it actually maybe would be a good play for NAIC. Probably a rogue deck. I would even say maybe don't play it, but it's a fun deck. Next up is Fusion Mew. Fusion Mew is most likely tier S, maybe tier 1. I think that it's good enough to put in tier S. Fusion Mew seems really good right now, thanks to Ice Cube being kind of a popular thing now. Because Ice Cube is how you beat Spiritomb, right? You knock out the Spiritomb with Ice Cube, you play Fusion Energy, so even if you don't have Ice Cube, you can still put energy on Genesect to draw cards, and Fusion Mew is still just an insane deck. We'll see how it does into Guardy, but it has, like, Lost City still. It has a bit of a better time into stuff like Drapion. Fusion Mew does still seem pretty solid right now. I think it's the better build of Mew just because it can beat Spiritomb. Now, if Spiritomb is not popular, Fusion Mew is still probably good. And that's like the upside of it. Like, Double Turbo Mew gets worse if Spiritomb's popular, but gets better if it's not. Fusion Mew doesn't really matter if Spiritomb is popular or not, because it's built to beat Spiritomb, but also built to beat even if it doesn't play Spiritomb. So that's why Fusion Mew is still maybe the better way to play Mew right now. Though I don't know if its Lost Box matchup is that great anymore. But maybe Iono is enough to make Fusion Mew better in the Lost Box. We'll have to see where Fusion Mew goes going into NAIC. But I think it's still a great deck. And still worth respecting. Like, I think Spiritomb is still good because yeah, Fusion Mew beats, Spiritomb with the Ice Cube, but Spiritomb still gives them a reason to not attack an Arceus or any Pokemon for that matter. They have to focus on Spiritomb, which lets you maybe set up, which is one of the things that Mew's good at, is stopping you from setting up because of donking you, or going first and bossing your only V Pokemon in play, or you're trying to KO your only V, you know what I mean? Next up are Miraidon decks. Probably they're all rogue. I would maybe say don't play them because Miraidon's, falls off a little bit. I think its Guardian matchup is pretty abysmal. Though I think it has a fine matchup into Xianpao and Lugia, and even maybe Arceus. So, kind of a weird play. I don't know, man. It does get Bravery Charm and Iono, potentially, which might make you have a better matchup into Lost Box, potentially, or at least makes your Lost Box matchup more winnable. So I don't want to say that Miraidon's all of a sudden like a don't-play deck, because I don't think it's a don't-play deck. I think the deck still has legs. How far can it run, though, is the question. Is it a deck that can get you day 2? I don't know if it can get you. I don't think it can get you day 2, but it's definitely a decent deck. I don't know, man. Maybe if you get lucky and don't hit too much Guardy, or maybe the deck does beat Guardy and I'm trolling all of you. Who knows? Next up is Dialga, probably another rogue deck. Dialga's a really cool archetype, and actually probably has a good matchup into Xianpao and maybe Gardevoir, depending on, what your build is playing in terms of supporters and what if you're playing Avery or not is basically what I'm trying to get at. But Dialga doesn't seem terrible, to be honest. I don't think that it's that bad of a deck. I think its matchup into Xianpao is kind of cute. But again, you're going to struggle in other areas, like maybe your Lost Box matchup is a little sketchy, or it comes down to whether or not you draw hot or not. I will say, now that Judge has kind of died off a little bit, I will say that you don't mind Iono. If this deck's playing, Rotom to set up, you actually don't mind getting Iono. You're still getting 6 new cards as opposed to 4 cards, right? So there is a world where Dialga finally can see play because of Path and Judge kind of falling off, which does help the deck set up a little bit easier. So that's like the one positive about Dialga Magnezone, is Iono is not bad for the deck, as opposed to Judge, which is a little bit more problematic, right? Next up is Control. Control's a sleeper deck. Maybe I should have made a sleeper tier, to be honest. I probably should have, because I think Control is definitely a sleeper deck. We all know Sander is probably going to play Control if he goes to NAIC, and we all know Control will see play. Snorlax Control is actually seeing play right now, and stuff like Mawile is kind of sneaky, so we'll have to see where Control goes. I think Control's kind of in a weird spot that it could actually finally be time for Control to be good. We'll have to see where it goes for NAIC, but Control could be the play for NAIC, or a play for NAIC. I mean, we'll definitely see a Control deck in NAIC regardless, right? Then we got to talk about Wo-Chien. Probably don't play. I mean, these Fortress Wo-Chien decks, it's a cool concept, but I'm not sure that the deck can beat a lot of the big decks consistently, especially in best of 3s, which you got to remember, a lot of these decks you have to play in a best of 3 scenario. Regis is rogue. I love Regis. Regis is cool. I don't think Regis is bad against Guardy and Xianpao and Lugia. Even Arceus decks, I think you're fine against. The problem is, I think you're going to get farmed by decks with Lost City and Lost Box, right? That's the problem. The Lost Zone is ultimately what's going to keep Regis away from probably ever being that good again, because your Lost Box matchup is a little awkward now that, you don't have Scoobin anymore, and Kyogre is still a thing, and Sableye farms you pretty easily. And yeah, your Lost City matchups are as tough because you can't net anymore. You can't go lone. You can't play your one Reggie down that you only have one left in the deck and then net it off the board so they can't Lost City it. You can't do that anymore. If your opponent puts 2 Pokemon of the same Reggie in the Lost Zone, you just lose the game, right? That's why I think Reggie's is rogue. It's not a terrible deck. I think Iono and Path is maybe the way to go. I think the fact that you can play Iono Path is pretty good, and that does help. And maybe that's what you can do to beat Lost Box is heavy Iono Path. The deck can still potentially attack on the first turn of the game. The deck still actually has legs, and it could be decent, but I don't know. I want Regis to do good. I hope somebody does well at NAIC with Regis, but for now, it's a rogue deck. Zorobox, also rogue. Really cool deck. I actually think Zorobox can beat almost anything except for Lost Zone decks and maybe Rapidstrike, but I think Zorobox is a fantastic deck that can actually beat everything. The problem is, Lost Box gatekeeps this deck from ever being any higher. If this tier list didn't have Lost Box on it, Zorobox could maybe even be a tier 2 or tier 1 deck. I genuinely believe it could be, but because Lost Box exists, this deck may not be getting there. I will say, though, Zorobox has a lot of room for cool improvements. Reverse Energy Wugtrio might be decent into Lost Box, because, if they're going to Sableye you, you can just play a mill deck at that point. Versus Lost Box, you can take up prizes and then just play a mill deck, essentially, with Wugtrio Reverse Energy, which I think is kind of cool. So maybe Wugtrio's the key. And then finally, we got the Palkia. Palkia still sticking around. I still want to include it because Palkia Xianpao is a deck that people are playing. I don't know if Palkia is that good, though. Like, does it beat Gardevoir? That's going to be the ultimate question. The deck is cool. I think Shampoo is a really cool addition to the deck, but the ultimate question with Palkia will be, does it beat Gardevoir? Can it beat Gardevoir, right? Even though it can play Lost City, maybe even Greninja and Articuno could be really good one-prize, Pokemon to pair with. Can it beat Gardevoir? We'll have to see. And there you have it. That is the tier list. Again, ultimately, I think Guardy, Lost Box, and probably Mew are going to be like the three big top tier decks, and then everything below it is going to be popular. Lugia can maybe be a tier S deck. Like, I might be underestimating Lugia in tier 1. Lugia might honestly be a tier S deck. I don't know what build of Lugia to put in tier S, so that's the problem. There's two builds right now, which I think are both pretty good. I don't know which one is tier S. So for now, I'm going to put in tier 1. But Lugia maybe is a tier S deck heading into NAIC, to be honest. But there you have it. That is my NAIC tier list. Let me know what you thought of it down below. And hopefully y'all will be at NAIC, because I'm going to be at NAIC. Hope to run into some of you. There's a lot of people at NAIC. It's going to be a humongous tournament. I mean, it's a very big venue. There's a lot of people going. I'm excited. I cannot wait. And hopefully I get to meet some of y'all at NAIC. And again, there will be more NAIC content here on the channel leading up to this Friday. So hope y'all are excited for that. And I will see you on another PC Live. Or, yeah, I don't upload PC Live on the second channel, kind of. But, yeah. I'm not doing outro on my second channel. I'm going to end the video off here. Hope y'all have a good rest of your day, and I'll see y'all hopefully at NAIC.